These are 5 things that the Lord has shown me that's going to take place in America. And so in 2011, in May of 2011, I had a dream that I was in a place where there were some tall buildings, and I noticed that there was a war going on, but it seemed to be pretty much one-sided. And it was very clear to me in this dream that America was under attack. It was very clear to me that America was under attack. That was very clear. I was very aware that some foreigners had come to attack America, and I was in a basement with my family, and we were looking out of the window, and I saw the president walking near this furnace. It looked like a big furnace. He was walking down the middle of this street, and it looked like there was a big furnace or some kind of oven in the middle of this street. And as he was walking, I saw a missile come, and it hit that furnace right when he got close to it, and I saw him disintegrate. And so I'm standing there looking at that, and I saw the whole scene the second time. I saw him walking down the middle of the street. He got close to this furnace, this oven, and as soon as he got close, I saw this missile come and strike that oven, and I saw him disintegrate. There was going to be no traces of him. Now that was something that I saw back in 2011, May of 2011. In November 21st of 2009, I had a dream that I was standing in a very desolate place. It was like you could look for miles and miles and miles and see nothing but just empty wasteland. It looked like a country would look after it had been attacked, and after it was just every tall building was destroyed. It was just flat all over the place. And I didn't see hardly any men there. I saw mostly women and children. And there was a very sad, somber atmosphere, like something very tragic had taken place and the people just never recovered. And I saw children with their mothers standing in a long, and I mean a very, very long line. And they were waiting on bread and water. They were in line, standing there waiting for bread and water. And the Lord was standing there on side of me. And he told me that this was going to be the state of this nation, that this nation was going to come to that point where people were going to be standing in long lines, not for peanut butter and jelly, not for steak, not for ice cream, not for corn. He said that the day would come in this nation where women and children would be happy to receive bread and water. That was going to be their food, bread and water. And he also told me to tell the people that this was not me, in other words, Brother Bolden, but it was of him. And those were the words he used. It was of him. In other words, he was the cause of it. And he said, when you say this to people, people are going to say, oh, that was just your dream. That was something that you had. But he said, no, to tell the people that it was of him. He's the one that caused this to come to this point. That was in November 21st, 2009. In November 13th of 2008, I dreamed that there was a bunch of tables in an open field, sitting in a field, and I saw President Obama along with some of his staff members, and I also saw his those that guard him. And I had a book in my hand, a big binder in my hand, and in this binder were some of the things that the Lord has shown me concerning this nation and what was going to take place. And also in that binder was some of the things that the Lord has shown other prophets that were going to take place in the nation. And I was aware that part of my job in ministry was to pull all of these people together that the Lord had been showing things to. And I was very aware that the Lord, just like he did in the Bible, he had given out bits and pieces of what was going to take place in the nation. In other words, he would give me a little bit, he would give another prophet a little bit, another prophet a little bit. We wouldn't all see the exact same thing, but it's just like a puzzle. If each of us have different pieces, and when we all come together, we put those pieces together so that you can see the whole picture, just like you would a puzzle. And so in this binder was all of the pieces of the puzzle, where I could go from A to Z to show the president what was going to take place. And so as I'm walking up to him, one of his security guards stop me and say, what is your business, or what do you want with the president while you're approaching him? And my words to him were these. Every king in the Bible that God raised up, there was a prophet that was assigned to him to let him know what was going to take place so that he could hear directly from God. And so that when there were attacks that were planned against that nation, the prophet would warn him and tell him what needed to be done. And there were prophets that were assigned to these kings, and these kings, even though some of them were in sin, they had enough sense to go to the prophets and ask the prophets, is it okay for me to go to war? And so I'm telling this man this, and I said, and Obama is no different, that God have assigned him a prophet to tell him the things that's going to take place, that God has not changed. He still have prophets today. And I said, and so here in this book are a bunch of things that the Lord have shown me and others that's going to take place, and we're here to warn him. And so the man smiled, and he gave me pass to go ahead and go to Obama. And so I went to him, and there he was sitting at the table, and I gave him the same pitch that I gave his security detail, that Obama, you're no different than any other king that the Lord have allowed to sit in office. There's a prophet that's assigned to you, and God got something to say, that these things are going to take place in America, and he reveals these things to warn you that these things are going to take place. He don't just allow these things to sneak upon you. These things are here to warn you. And as I was talking to him, I noticed that he wasn't really paying attention to what I was saying. In fact, it was like he could care less. And as I was talking to him, he was sitting at the table, behind this table, and a woman who was very provocatively dressed, like had on a bathing suit, she passed by him. And as she passed in front of him, she sat a bullet shell right down in front of him. And I looked at that bullet shell, and it was spent. In other words, the bullet was already out of it. It was just a shell there. And that was what I saw on November 13th, 2008. Now, in January 1st, 2006, I had a dream that I was standing above this military base. I was about a half a mile in the air above this military base close to my hometown. And I was looking down on that military base. I could see the whole base because the Lord had me suspended up in the air. And I heard a voice say, "This is Fort Polk." And then I was taken several miles away from there in the air. And when I got to a certain point, I went down in the ground and I saw another military base. And this military base, in that underground, was a nuclear power plant that was a secret that nobody was supposed to know about. And underground, this nuclear power plant, it was a whole military faction under there guarding that underground, keeping it a secret and operating it secretly from what America could see. And I saw soldiers walking around under there, and I was just walking around looking around, and they couldn't see me. I was like a tourist of the Lord, I guess you could say, where he was showing me different things about it. And he took me back up in the air, out from underneath the ground, back up in the air, and he took me back over to Fort Polk, and I about half a mile in the air again, looking down on it, and he said again, "This is Fort Polk." Then he took me back to this other place, this nuclear power plant, and I went back underground, and he allowed me to see other things going on under there. They were guarding this nuclear power plant. And then he took me back in the air and took me back about a half a mile, standing above Fort Polk suspended in the air. And he said it once and for the last time, "This is Fort Polk." Now, why did he do that? He was trying to get me to understand that these were two separate military bases, and that the nuclear power plant that I saw underneath the ground was not Fort Polk, but it was close to it. And this last time he took me back to this other place, instead of taking me underground into the nuclear power plant, he took me and he sat me on top of it. And as I stood on top of it, I could see people walking around above it, and they had no idea that there was a whole military base underneath the ground, that there was a nuclear power plant underground. No idea. They're just going about their everyday life. No idea that they were living on top of a nuclear power plant. So this time he sat me on top of the ground. And when he sat me on top of the ground, he told me to look up. And when I looked up, I saw foreign jets flying overhead dropping bombs on top of that nuclear power plant. It was because they had spies that knew where all of the nuclear power plants were in America, and that they were going to bomb all of these nuclear power plants, which was going to cause a nuclear explosion all over the place, and America was going to burn. This is why all of the land that I saw in that previous dream looked desolate, because it had all been burned up. And so that was the dream that I had in January 1st, 2006. This last one that I'm going to share with you, I dreamed and I saw on the East Coast, on the north, on the East Coast, that there was an angel standing out there in the Atlantic Ocean. And this angel was a tall angel. I could not see from his shoulders up, because from his shoulders up were in the clouds, and his feet were in the ocean. That's how tall he was. And he was standing there with a sword. And I heard a voice from heaven, and this voice from heaven, which was God, of course, he spoke in a different language that I couldn't understand, but I knew what the command was. And when the command was given, when this voice came from heaven, the angel withdrew his sword, and he swung that sword. And that sword was so big that it covered all of New York. Except when he swung that sword, what I saw were the Twin Towers fall. And they fell, just like what you saw on TV, how they crumbled. Then the angel went to put his sword up, back into the sheath. And before he could, the Lord spoke again and told him to prepare again. And as that voice finished speaking that angel took that sword and he stood like this, waiting for an order from the Lord to swing it again. And so what was the Lord showing me in that dream? And that's why we stand here with confidence and we say that God was behind 9/11. God is the one that called for that. And again, we don't say that like we're disconnected and like we didn't feel the effects of it, but we still have to tell the truth about it. God was behind 9/11. Or we say, well, you know, the Middle Eastern people, they got together and did, but who was it that caused that? Who was it that set that in motion? Everything that takes place in the natural realm, it takes place in the spiritual realm first. God was behind it as a form to chastise this nation, you see. Now, if America don't ever get that and ever at least come to grips with that, then how are we going to turn from our wicked ways? If we don't know that 9/11 took place to chastise America, how are we going to turn from our wicked ways? You see? And so in that, God gave the command for the angel to swing, and when he swung, those Twin Towers fell. Then the angel went to put the sword back up, and the Lord told him, don't put it up. And he was standing there waiting on a command. And so what are we saying tonight? There's going to be another attack on America. This attack is going to be much greater than the previous, because America didn't heed the call the first time. This attack is going to be much greater. And so my prayer is that God's people will take heed to what they've heard. As we read in the 13th chapter of Luke, the people that died in those attacks on 9/11, according to the 13th chapter of Luke, it wasn't because they were more wicked than anybody else in America. But we are warned that except we repent, we can expect the same exact thing. And so that is what God is doing. He's calling America to repentance, to turn back to Him. And let's not take these things for granted. And let's not take these things lightly. God is a righteous and holy God, and He still hates sin. And we can't, as Americans, say that we can live in sin and still sing the song, God Bless America. God will never bless sin.